Welcome back from morning tea. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Cam Brooks today. We're both research fellows within the UQ Learning Lab, and we both work together within the Partner Schools programme. We'll be facilitating this next session. So this session will feature presentations from some of our 2022 partner schools. Some of these schools have joined us just this year, and some of them have been with us for 3 years. All of them are to be commended on their outstanding commitment to their projects, particularly given the extraordinary challenges that we've faced this year, but also in the past few years with regards to COVID, lockdowns, remote learning, and multiple natural disasters around the country as well. They all affected our schools in different ways, but thank you for your commitment. It's been fantastic. Cam.
As Steph mentioned earlier today, our Partner Schools model is about building capability in school teams to engage with the science of learning in ways that are meaningful, actionable, and sustainable in their own contexts. We have structured today's session around the knowledge mobilisation model that Steph presented earlier. Our first 3 schools will share stories of how they have created knowledge through exploratory projects within their schools. Following that, 3 schools will then share how they have used knowledge from the science of learning to inform practice and apply findings from research in systematic ways to impact a range of learner outcomes.
So finally, in the session, we will have a panel discussion with a couple of our school partners who are tackling the most difficult part of the knowledge mobilisation model, how to sustain and scale evidence-informed practices in their school communities. This is the most difficult phase because it requires buy-in from teachers and a willingness to perhaps do things a little bit differently. Whilst the focus of this session is on school-based applications of the science of learning, there is much in what our educators will share today that can have an application to other learning contexts, particularly in relation to the processes involved in understanding context, developing processes and practices, and building capability and efficacy. Okay, so let's get started with our schools sharing their projects on the production of knowledge, that part of Levin's model that Steph's already mentioned today. These 3 schools are going to present their presentations via video, but between the videos, we'll ask representatives from the schools to answer any questions that you may have. The first school that we're going to hear from is Ravenswood School for Girls, and we'll cue up that video just now. Thanks.
We are all born curious. Our young, inquisitive nature is boundless until it stops. Life, school, and friends get in the way. We hear with ever-increasing regularity that anxiety, depression, and disengagement is growing in our youth. But we also know that adolescence is a prime time for pro-social, emotional, and cognitive development. Our students are explicitly taught positive education and exposed daily to the importance of growth mindset, persistence, the power of yet, alongside instruction that acknowledges the limitations of working memory and cognitive load. But even with all of this, our multidisciplinary research team identified a concerning trend of passive, risk-averse, feedback-resistant, performance-orientated, pressured students who we thought had lost their spark and their love of learning. The idea that a lack of curiosity, that desire to know, could be an underlying problem seemed to make sense. So we realised we wanted to better understand the extent our secondary students were or were not curious, and what learning experiences teachers could implement in the classroom to foster a curious mindset. Research studies have found that curiosity is associated with higher positive emotions, lower anxiety, more life satisfaction, greater psychological well-being, and encourages knowledge risk-taking and academic achievement. There is, however, a lack of conceptual clarity. Is it externally driven or internally ignited? Is it situational or just an innate disposition? From our readings, we felt that Lowenstein's information gap perspective aligned with what we wished for our students. It emphasises 3 key elements: that of recognising there is a gap in knowledge, having a desire to close this gap, and feeling capable to do so. It also recognises that for a zone of optimal curiosity, there needs to be an existing knowledge base so that curiosity can arise. It is knowledge and inquiry, not knowledge or inquiry. Our first phase of investigation involves students in years 7 to 12 undertaking a short 10-minute survey to better understand their levels of curiosity. Key findings from this challenged our hypothesis that students weren't curious. Instead, what we discovered was that they were curious, but they did not feel that they had the time, skill, or confidence to ask questions. There was a noticeable decline in curiosity, questioning, and uncertainty tolerance from year 7, with a clear and significant dip in year 9, what some researchers now refer to as the adolescent dip. However, students who reported higher feelings of curiosity also tended to report being more comfortable asking questions, more tolerant of uncertainty, more open to experiences, and better at figuring out new things at school. From these survey findings, the research team thought it important to draw on the wealth of practical expertise from our classroom teachers. If our students were curious, then how could we foster this? Our process involved undertaking focus groups with each of our departments and asking these teachers what strategies they use to cultivate curiosity. These suggestions were captured in a staff strategy collaboration document, allowing the research team time to collect, select, and organise strategies. We found patterns in the strategies, and so, through iterative discussions and returning to the literature and the classroom, we were able to identify 4 key categories of teaching strategies and their supporting criteria. This forms our curiosity framework. The first category involves recognising the gap and includes strategies that help students to identify prior knowledge, reflect on their knowledge gap, and articulate their needs to move forward. The second category is fostering wonder and includes strategies that have teachers modelling comfort with uncertainty, providing a question-safe environment, and use of inquisitive and open-ended language. The third category is building deeper learning and involves strategies that prompt productive confusion, encourage peer collaboration, and demystify the feedback process. The final category is mastery and beyond, and involves strategies that revisit the initial gap, consider new questions to move forward, and to share their knowledge within and beyond the classroom. Our key learnings so far. First, don't assume. Seek out student and teacher voices. Second, collaboration is essential, both within the team and with UQ. Many in the science of learning talk about building bridges, but really we need to be cultivating communities. The UQ partnership is such a community. Third, embrace difference in your school team. Our discussions have been richer and our learning and way forward deeper because of our diversity. Although the possibilities seem endless, to help both students and staff become more curious about curiosity, our next 2 steps include undertaking an intervention study with our staff using our curiosity framework and building a meta-awareness of curiosity amongst students by creating student curiosity profiles. Our driving force being to ignite their spark and kindle the flames of curiosity.
Well, credits too. Fantastic. So are there any questions? Would you like to come down? Bring the team down. I mean, I think actually only 10 should be put out here. You're all welcome. I just felt pressured to come down. I'm sorry, Kay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And a fantastic video presentation as well. Thank you. I know that we met briefly earlier this month, I think, or just last month, and it was great to see the passion and the interest that you all had in the project. So I just wondered, a question I had, what was the initial feeling that you had when you first started out? Because it wasn't just this year, was it? You've been working on it for a couple of years, is that right? What was the initial reaction that you had to working in the Partner Schools program?
I think the initial reaction was that we were quite overwhelmed, and we decided to focus in on curiosity. Took us a while, and because we had such a diverse team from different faculties, we thought that it might be almost too big of a question to draw on from each one of our what we thought was unique areas. But then when we really started talking and collaborating together, we did find that common terms kept coming up, and then with Steph and the collaboration with UQ, they really allowed us to hone that into the curiosity topic that we ended up covering.
Yeah, Fiona.
And I think it was also that ability to go to the research. So because it didn't seem, from the problems that we never thought about curiosity. And it was only when we found the research, thanks to Steph, that we made that connection that, oh, actually, I can see how this now relates. So I don't think we would have got there otherwise. Yeah.
I think everyone will agree that when the word curiosity was put on the table, we all kind of went, wow, because it's so abstract, and we thought, how do we quantify this? How do we wanted a concrete way of approaching things. And so that was challenging for us in terms of the research project, but really rewarding as well.
Sorry, I was probably the most skeptical of all. But yeah, it was a really hard concept to sort of get my head around, and probably took, thank you to COVID though, I did come around eventually, but it was a really hard concept because, as Katerina said, it's a really abstract concept, and to do research on curiosity took a lot of research and discussion. So I think with the help of my colleagues and the professionalism of UQ, we all came around and came to a common goal. So that was really rewarding for me.
Oh, and I think then the survey results also really helped. So that really set us in a different way, because we had made assumptions and suddenly our students were saying something different.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Ryan. Yes.
And now I'm the official person. This is strange now. I'm here and you're there. My question, just exactly related to that last point, I found it super interesting that you guys, once you would come to this curiosity idea, that you clearly had perceptions about what you expected to find. I'm wondering what may have led you to kind of have those perceptions in the first place. What are the things that made you think, oh, well, our students probably lack this?
Just from my experience, it was probably, it was an incorrect assumption, and we came to it from observations in our classroom or what we thought we were seeing. The lack of spark, questioning, a bit of apathy, not volunteering, that kind of thing in the classroom. Oh yeah, and not taking on feedback that we were giving them, not engaging with that feedback, not acting on that feedback. So we took that as being that they weren't curious. But then we found they were.
Sorry, and I think it also came from a point of care that we all had for our students and a determination for them to succeed, not just academically, but to succeed as far as well-being is concerned in the way they felt about themselves and in their learning journey. And so I think we were probably looking for reasons that we could grasp onto and build upon. So it was a great joy actually to find out that they were curious.
I was just going to add, to add to that, we wanted to find a reason and we labelled it, or we made it up really, and thought that that's what we would find. And in fact, we didn't find that. Our girls are actually very curious. We just need to cultivate that or develop it in ways, and it came down to what we do in the classroom is going to be the most important factor.
Yeah, and I think we were worried that the girls seemed motivated just by marks, and that's where we were worried about them, because it's like how they've lost that love just to have fun with learning, and so that motivation. And we all sat around and were complaining and frustrated and worrying, and it was Stephanie and Jack, and it was via Zoom at that stage because I think we'd just got out of COVID maybe, and they came up with that, well, we think what you're talking about is curiosity. So it was a really fascinating unpacking of that, because yeah, we'd made false assumptions in our classrooms.
Thank you. Yep, I think possibly two more. Okay, I think these will be the last two we do need to move on. But yes, Karen.
All right. Hello.
Yeah.
My name's Rowena Long. I work at UQ in the Office of the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic. I'm interested to know, at what point in the process did you begin to tell your parent body about this research? How did you go about it, and what have their responses been?
Yeah, we haven't got there yet. We've just done it internally at this stage, but I think it will be another part of it. We've already started some research, just doing things with Natasha with some of our Year 7s and 8s, and it was fantastic because I got parent permission to do that, and it was a really quick turnaround, and it was so super supportive. Our head of school also, she's very big into well-being and positive psychology, so there is a research flavour in the school already. So I think the parents will be open and interested, but it's the next step. I think we want to engage our teachers first and just really get them with a common language, a common understanding, and then going from there to then build it with the parents and the students as well. Anyone else want to add to that?
I'd say I think engaging the teachers was really important, and the fact that we are from diverse faculties, although Ken and I share languages a little bit, meant that we were going back to our departments and having the discussion and asking our colleagues how they fostered curiosity and the strategies they used. So we've got the support at least of our own departments, and that's been really important.
Yeah, that was probably one of the greatest things that happened, was going back to my maths department and asking them what we do to foster a curious mindset, and coming up with 20, 30, 40 items that we do in the classroom, and everybody being aware of the things that they do, which was a real, pat on the back moment kind of thing for my staff. And being aware of that is that then they've got great buy-in in where we're trying to go with this research.
There was one quick question, maybe just one respondent, please, because we do need to move on to the next one. Sorry, if I could encourage you to just be brief. Thank you.
Very quick question. Firstly, my compliments on your presentation. It was fantastic. Also, great news to hear that schools don't actually kill curiosity, because we get told that all the time. So my question is, can you tell us a little bit more about the metric you use to determine that we're not killing curiosity, and can we borrow it? Because that sounds fantastic.
The metric we used. Tim, would that be?
Do what guys means me to? Yeah. The survey. Yeah.
So it was really, originally was the survey of 30, 40 questions that we developed with Steph and Jack and our leadership team. a range of questions on their ability to ask questions, whether they like discomfort, whether they feel, able to make decisions when under pressure, things like that. And from there, then we just collated responses. And they were set into those, was it 5 or 6 sort of categories? Taken from existing surveys. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, folks. Perfect. Thank you. Wonderful. And so the next partner school presentation is from Melbourne Girls Grammar School, and again in video format. So we'll watch that one now. Thanks, Alex.
Hi, and welcome to this presentation on learning strategies at Melbourne Girls Grammar School. I often ask the question of my students, so what are you going to do to revise? And most frequently the answer is, oh, I'll read through my notes. Speaking with other teachers across a variety of faculties in the senior school, some worrying anecdotal evidence started to emerge, one in which our students were seemingly not applying the most effective strategies for learning inside or outside of the classroom. And this sparked a discussion about what learning strategies do our students know and use. Are they using the ones that we as teachers think are effective and backed up with research-based evidence? And is the anecdotal evidence reflective of only our senior year students? What about our junior years girls? Are they having a different experience of learning? So in 2021, we embarked on a journey to find out what learning strategies our students from Prep to 12 know and routinely use. And then during 2022, we began to research what it was that our students know about learning strategies, how they utilize them, whether it be in the classroom, in learning commons, or at home. The overarching aim of the research is to gather subjective understanding of how and when different learning strategies are used within the MGGS community, and hope that further research can be conducted in 2023. As teachers, we are well acquainted with the research into different learning strategies, but perhaps sometimes we take that knowledge for granted and don't always explicitly teach learning strategies to our students. So in actual fact, we may be introducing a number of really effective strategies, but because we are not labeling them or actively suggesting them to students, they get lost in translation. Or perhaps we're not either explicitly or implicitly teaching learning strategies. It could also be our students view those strategies as specific to the learning context in which they were introduced and not transferable to other subjects. This in particular is problematic when we think about our role in preparing students for life outside of school. So the problem of what learning strategies students at MGGS use could be conceptualized in a multitude of different ways, and we didn't want to preempt any findings about what they do and don't know. So the research problem is summarized as the need to further explore the use of learning strategies by students at MGGS. And some of the key themes that comprise this problem are the experience of learning strategies from students from Prep to 12, the effectiveness of those learning strategies used, and whether students are using context-specific learning strategies. Because we really wanted to highlight the experience of the students, and because we didn't want to lead them in any way, we decided to ask our students about 4 key social and cognitive processes, based loosely on the theory of social learning by Bandura. We know that in order to learn, students need to pay attention, they need to retain that information, and they need to be able to reproduce it and be motivated to do so. So what are the strategies that they use to pay attention, retain, reproduce, and motivate themselves? So we use this as the basis of the questions we asked our students. We also use Zimmerman's theory on self-regulated learning to guide how we categorize student responses. And this allowed us to see which motivational, cognitive, and metacognitive strategies they would use either when planning, performing, or reflecting. We used a convenient sample in middle and senior school years, and we asked them an open-ended survey which produced qualitative data using 4 scenario-based questions. In the junior years, we verbally asked the sample students between in groups of 3 or 4, and we also asked staff to participate via survey. Initially, there was a reluctance to participate, but eventually we ended up with over 150 responses from both students and staff, and this was really the turning point in our research. When we spoke to the junior year students, their answers revealed there was an emphasis on focus, on being focused and focusing. The word was mentioned in almost all answers across all year groups, And apart from a few students who suggested, for example, using a writing scaffold to help keep them focused, many could not elaborate further. Some surprising findings from the middle and senior years programs indicate that our students are reliant on teachers for support, especially when challenged, and most surprisingly see learning as a solitary activity that requires silence and being apart from others. For example, there were very few instances of students citing strategies that included working alongside or with others. One of the most startling pieces of information was that 46% of students, when asked what strategies they would use to help get a task finished, said that they would use their headphones, and that 30% answered that they would sit by themselves. What the students wrote for their answers did not seem to correlate to what the staff was saying, though. And as such, we need to think more deeply about the learning strategies that we actually use in the class and naming them in class and talking about which learning strategies we could use when completing different activities. The staff survey showed us that the majority of the staff had a sound knowledge of a range of strategies, but further discussion is needed with those teachers to benefit our teaching and learning at MGGS. So where to next? The next step would be to create a common language, and alongside that common language, create a kit of learning strategies that are age appropriate for the different parts of our school, but that also have a common thread so that our students recognize that what they learn in one part of school still applies in another, and then also hopefully outside of school. We would like to conduct some focus groups of students and staff to delve deeper into what we already know and do really well, and really drill down into what we could spend more time enhancing. I think this is really important because the research didn't really show off or uncover the wonderful work that is going on at school and the amazing strategies that our students do use. Although this has been evidenced in other ways in our school community, the students didn't seem to be able to apply them when presented with a novel situation. Post that, I think that short recordings of staff modelling explicit teaching and learning strategies so that we can use the brilliant examples from our own school community to help further develop our staff. And that leads us to any questions that we may have.
So yeah, that was Steph, another Steph at MGGS presenting that, but we're here with Ashley today. Thanks for coming in, Ashley. Any questions from the floor to start with? Anybody got a question or online? No. Okay, yeah, thanks.
Speaking to the word cloud that came up in terms of the strategies students used, the biggest word there was friends. That wasn't, unless I missed it, it wasn't spoken to. Is that as in that they would sit with friends or that they would strategize with friends? Could you elaborate?
It was actually more the opposite, that that they would want to avoid them when studying. So one of the things that came through was that a lot of the students, in identifying what they would want to do in order to study effectively, was to isolate themselves. And so they spoke about finding time to be on their own. A lot of the really strong ones that came through, which I thought was fairly worrying, was they said, I would put my headphones in and listen to music in order to allow me to focus. And so their beliefs around attention and focus played really strongly into the responses that they gave about what are effective learning strategies, but they really struggled to articulate, but even if you do isolate yourselves, what are you actually doing in that time? They really struggled to articulate what that was. But yeah, there was that common theme around, I want to be away from my friends in that time.
Thank you.
Interesting. Jason in the middle.
Yeah, I do research on attention, so it's really interesting to see that word cloud. Avoid distractions, move away from my friends, put headphones on, listen to music. That's an interesting one, and I know kids do. My son does that all the time. I'm not sure it's a great strategy actually, but nevertheless, I guess I'm wondering whether another approach, thinking about the research here, another approach would be to see whether there's some kind of recognition of what a good strategy would be. So in your research, it was about, we would call it a sort of open-ended kind of design, eliciting responses. I wonder if you were to give us a statement about a strategy for learning and get get kids to sort of rate it and say, I think this would be a 1 out of 10 as a strategy. This would be a 7 out of 10 as a strategy. And you could even have something about, how often do I use that myself? Not at all, sometimes, all the time. And then you can start to sort of quantify some of the things and add on to the really lovely qualitative data that you've got.
I agree completely. And I think that will form part of the next steps in our project there as well. And I particularly like the comment that you made at the end, because I do think that students sometimes will, if you give them that, they might make some relatively informed judgments about what are effective learning strategies. But the key question is then, are you actually doing it? Because there is a little bit of a misalignment, I find, between the knowledge that students can have about what they should be doing and what they are actually doing is misaligned, and trying to work out, to what extent that is happening, and then trying to think about what intervention we can design that will try and align the practice to the knowledge then as well.
I'm just going to add to it from a research from the project perspective. We did talk about doing that as the initial part of the project, but when we thought about it, we thought we're just putting words into their mouths. And the team at MGGS really wanted to be very exploratory. They really wanted to find out from the girls, what do you know? And what do our teachers know? And so that was always the intention, was the next step was going to be, here are some effective strategies. What do you know? How familiar are you with them? And then, our schools like Terrace and Canterbury and Goulburn Valley and even Churchie, who are here today, can really provide some insight into that next step. But it was about getting that lay of the land. What do people know? And what's the language that they are using around that effective learning?
And when we really, in those discussions, we really wanted to go into this research without having too many assumptions, because we had a significant amount of assumptions about what we thought students did currently know and do, and that was all anecdotal data. And in those initial discussions, we sort of said, let's take a step backwards and let's spend this year establishing what the lay of the land is that we're working with, rather than just assuming what is the case and what isn't.
Hello, very interesting to me, especially. We've been thinking along similar lines. So Kelly has a poster, which maybe we can chat about together in the break. But yeah, I agree with you that I think there's often when you're trying to understand student learning strategies, you're asking students to rate how well they do things, but that involves them having awareness in how well they do things, which we know students don't have a good handle on. So one thing we've tried in a similar kind of design is we have students tell us what they do, like you've done, which is really interesting. We've learned a lot of things as well. We had assumptions about what we thought students were doing, and the data showed us something different. And we found a couple of things. One is that sometimes it's not just a strategy that's good, but more strategies are good, even if some of them are not great individually. But also we found some interesting effects about if you ask students, how good do you think you are at avoiding distractions? And they rate. Then we ask, how do you do it? And we rate it objectively, their strategic quality. We found some evidence that students kind of fall into 3 groups. One group that thinks they're really good and are, one group that thinks they're not very good and are not, and a group that thinks they're really good and are not. And it's that mismatch group we find struggles the most with, they have lower kind of objective measures of like cognitive flexibility and those kind of things. So it'd be really interesting to see if you find something similar, that there's this maybe a mismatch between awareness of what's good and what they think they're doing.
I agree. And I think as part of that process, one of the things that has become really obvious to us through this is we start to need to develop that common language as well, because I would say it's very disparate across our school in how we talk about effective learning strategies with our students, not only at the stages of schooling development, but then obviously in just different classrooms and in different faculties and discipline areas as well. And so it's understandable then that the students are not really developing some of that knowledge because it's not explicit or systematic in how we are doing it. So we might ask them questions around an element of, we could ask them a question about retrieval practice, but for some students, if that's not a term that they've heard before, they may actually be doing that, but they may say, no, I don't do that, because we haven't developed that common language about what that is or what it looks like either.
Brilliant, thank you. There's plenty of time at lunch to ask questions to. So do make sure you hold any questions and seek out the people that you've seen here. The last video presentation in the knowledge production, the exploratory project is from Wesley College down in Melbourne. Thanks, Alex.
Hello, we are from Wesley College. My name is Donna Davies and my colleague is Dr. Anita Gambrelis, and we represent our team, which you can see on the screen here. Wesley College is an independent coeducational school from early childhood to year 12 with 3 campuses with a combined enrolment of 3,400 students. Based on previous quantitative wellbeing data gathered by the school, the team were interested to gain a greater insight and exploration of key themes through a qualitative approach to understand our student perceptions of what we were doing well and what could we improve by way of supporting their safety, connection and engagement in school life at Wesley College. Our research question was formed: what do students believe helps make them feel safe, happy, connected and motivated at Wesley College? For this project, we explored self-determination theory to understand how a student's autonomy, competence and relatedness or connection to others may influence their well-being and autonomous motivation. This is really important to us to understand post-COVID-19. Exploring self-determination theory informed our approach in researching what makes students feel safe, happy, connected and motivated at school. We gathered our qualitative data through focus groups at years 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. And we started with a sorting activity and then asked students questions such as, what does it mean to belong at Wesley? What does it mean to be independent? How do you know when you've achieved something at school? The interviews were analysed using a thematic approach.
We're in the early stages of analysing ours. We appreciate the time to work with Dr. Stephanie McMahon, who helped us to identify common themes in our data that align with self-determination theory concepts. We will continue to pull our evidence under these themes to look for trends and again a deeper understanding of our school context. Today we will be focusing on one concept related to self-determination theory, which is relatedness, or belonging as we have identified it. The main themes that we felt were prominent in our data were references to friendship, trust, and catering and valuing diversity. Friendships appeared to underpin a student's sense of belonging at Wesley, and it was pleasing to hear from our students that they have formed strong friendships and they felt that their uniqueness was valued by friends and the community. Trust or implications for trust were observed frequently, with students highlighting physical and emotional safety with peers and teachers and strong work ethic exhibited in collaborative work. Physical spaces were also commented on by students as a way of identifying connectedness, especially for our younger students. A couple of quotes here emphasising the importance of friendship to our students. Just having a good friendship group that you like feels like you belong here. Having a shared sense of purpose built upon the concept of trust, as demonstrated in these quotes. Our older students articulated rather clearly how they felt accepted and valued in our community. Our Year 10 students identified the importance of reciprocity, which ties in nicely with the 3 main themes identified. Holistically, looking at all of our data, we highlighted 4 important ideas. That is, school is generally accepted as a safe place, and there was a level of automaticity associated with it. That friendship is one of the most important elements of being at school and feeling that you belong. That there are words, themes underpinning encouragement, kindness and trust that were used often to describe experiences at school, and that there was a high level of importance for autonomy, but that was more so recognised in the older students. At this stage, Donna and I have started our analysis with the Glen Waverley campus data. However, we intend to work closely with our college peers to review our data holistically. Additionally, we are keen to see connections with this work with our college wellbeing survey data. We intend for this work to inform our current pastoral program and in the pipeworks we're creating a Wesley-specific teaching and learning framework. We look forward to share our findings with our community.
Thanks. And Anita and Donna are with us.
Not sure if you can hear
So,
me.
yeah, wonderful project and fantastic presentation. Thank you. I'll open again to the floor. Do you have any questions?
I'll start with a comment.
Please do.
When we started on this journey, we really didn't know where we were going and what we were doing. But if I transported my mind back to February last year in Melbourne, we were in a post-traumatic state. Our staff were in that state, our students were in that state. And the theme was very much about reconnecting. How do we all reconnect? How do our staff reconnect? How do our students reconnect? How do our parents reconnect? And so that came through very strongly for us around, well, what does make our students feel connected to school? And then how do we tie that into, or what's that informed by? And I think Cam, and along with Stephanie, was really supportive of us starting to think about self-determination theory. And then we started to think about, okay, well, what is it that makes students feel like I can achieve at school, that I can actually belong at school, that I can be really great at something and have that acknowledgement as well. So it was kind of a post-COVID influenced project, to be honest. But I think the next stage is how can we then combine that and the great work that we heard this morning around metacognition and understanding my strengths and my teaching, my learning capabilities as well.
And particularly looking at the social emotional learning theories and practices, as well as self-regulated learning. They're really high on my radar with our next steps.
You said that the data and your findings will inform hopefully next year, moving into next year, will inform a pedagogical framework. Does that already exist, or are you reinventing or reimagining? How does the pedagogical framework fit into that?
Where it doesn't exist as such.
Okay.
Being an IB school, we do follow the frameworks associated with the International Baccalaureate, but we're looking to really pull out what are the great things that we do, who we stand for as an academic institution, and really celebrate and have that common or collective efficacy of who we are. So that's our next step, and we hope that this work will really inform those next steps.
Well, I think that's
yeah. No, and I was just going to add to that we actually have a wellbeing framework that was designed last year, and we're having lots of conversations. I'm in the wellbeing space. Anita's office is right next door, teaching and learning, and we're always in and out of each other's offices. We're saying we actually need a framework that combines teaching and learning and wellbeing, and I think one of the schools has done that. I think, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's very exciting from the partner schools project view. The work that you're doing with us and through it is having tangible meaning for you in your context in your school, and I think that's one of the unique things about the partner schools project, and it's great that that's coming out.
And we're really excited to share the work with our staff and our community because it's very affirming. The things that our students have said about our school is actually quite extraordinary. And I contacted our marketing department. I said, there's a little bit of gold sitting right here for you, because the students talked about, I can be myself, I can be really unique and feel that I belong to this school. And I think that's quite extraordinary, for Wesley. Yeah.
Sure.
It's awesome to hear that you're having such a positive response from your students. I'm wondering, is there anything in your methodology that you have done so far or that you plan to do that maybe tries to identify particularly at risk or vulnerable students in particular?
Yeah, we did talk about that. And we felt that because there was already a lot of trauma, and there still is a lot of trauma existing, that we felt that we didn't necessarily want to target those students at this moment in time, that they're still, in recovery and to come and answer questions about whether I feel safe at school. We didn't want to have that impact of potentially them reflecting and trauma, re-traumatizing them in terms of how they are currently feeling. But we did have that conversation around, we actually need to hear a broader range of voices as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't really included that element in this body of work, but obviously there are interventions at school looking into those kids who are at risk. So it's not that we're not conscious of it, it's just not part of this body of work. Yeah, but we do, just to finish up, are really excited to be part of this again next year and just continuing our work, and really have gotten so much out of the year. And just my past is science academic work, so it's really nice to just really build in those skills for me personally, and going into the education sphere and social theories. So thank you.
And we absolutely couldn't have done it without Cam and Stephanie. We would have got lost.
And Jen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
Said it kind of